Hello and welcome to L2R. I'm Kinaesthesia, and today I'll be going over the strategy for Nefarian on the heroic difficulty. Nefarian is the final boss in the Blackwing Descent raid instance, and he talks an exceptional amount of trash for somebody who's already been killed before. He'll try to get his undead sister to fight his battle for him, but considering you've killed her twice, she won't be much of a threat either. Collectively, you've killed both of these guys 4 times before. Kinda gives a strange meaning to keeping it all in the family. Nefarian is a 3-phase multi-mob fight. There is of course Nefarian himself. He has around 179 million HP. His sister Onyxia has around 35 million. Throughout the fight, there are bone warriors that will spawn and respawn, as well as mobs in phase 2 called chromatic prototypes. The bone warriors have around 39 million HP, while the prototypes have 10 million. Your raid will want to bring 3 tanks, 6 to 7 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup. If you want to stack the raid in your favor, bring a prot pally. Make sure 3 of your healers are paladins and that at least 2 are discipline priests. The DPS makeup still does not matter, but you'll need good interrupters. In phase 1, the raid will have to fight Nefarian, Onyxia, and the first wave of animated bone warriors. Onyxia and Nefarian both share a Shadow Flame breath and Tail Lash. The breath deals a high amount of Shadow Flame damage to all enemies in a frontal cone every half second for 1.5 seconds. Additionally, the breath will resurrect any animated bone warriors hit by it. The Tail Lash hits all players behind the target for moderate damage and stuns them for 2 seconds. They each have a cleave that hits all players in front of them for high physical damage. Whenever Onyxia and Nefarian are within 60 yards of each other, they will each gain the Children of Deathwing buff. This increases their attack speed by 100% and lasts until they are separated. Periodically, Onyxia will cast Electrical Discharge. This deals extremely high nature damage to all players on Onyxia's sides. Onyxia has a lightning charge level that will appear as a bar on the UI. The damage from her lightning increases as this bar fills up. When it is full, she will explode and successfully wipe the raid. She must be killed before this occurs. At the beginning of phase 1, Nefarian will cast Hail of Bones. This creates swirling void zones on the ground that will be hit for moderate shadow damage and spawn an animated bone warrior after a few seconds. Every 10% of Nefarian's health, his lightning machine will activate, dealing devastating nature damage to the entire raid. Because this occurs every 10% of his health, throughout the encounter, it can be controlled. He will also cast Dominion throughout the encounter. This will mind control 5 random players. They will begin to walk towards nearby Dominion portals and will have their action bars replaced with new abilities. While mind controlled, players can use Stolen Power and Free Your Mind. Stolen Power will build stacks of a unique buff, causing them to do more damage after the MC is broken. Free Your Mind breaks the mind control. If the mind control player reaches the Dominion portal, they will be instantly killed. This means it is up to them to break themselves out of the mind control in time. The animated bone warriors in this phase have empowering strikes, causing their melee and ranged attacks to increase their damage and movement speed. Animated bones causes the Shadow Flame energy to animate their bones, but drains 2 energy every second. When the ads run out of energy, they die harmlessly. In phase 2, lava will fill the room. Sitting in it will stack the magma debuff. This deals 5,000 fire damage every second and increases the damage taken from magma by 2,000. This effect stacks. Nefarian will spam Shadow Flame Barrage in this phase to deal moderate Shadow Flame damage to multiple random targets. Occasionally, he will afflict random raid members with the Explosive Cinders debuff. This spell deals high fire damage to all nearby players and knocks them back after around 10 seconds. Chromatic prototypes will spawn in phase 2 and begin to chain cast Blast Nova, an ability that deals high fire damage to all players. This must be interrupted every time. Players who refuse to step off of the pillars at the end of phase 2 will be hit with Nefarian's Shadow of Cowardice. This inflicts moderate Shadow Flame damage and increases Shadow Flame damage taken by 100%. In Phase 3, Nefarian will use all of his Phase 1 abilities and gain Shadow Blaze Spark. This fireball is launched at the animated Bone Warrior ads. If hit with the spark, the ads will have their energy replenish or be respawned if already dead. Additionally, the spark will spawn a Shadow Blaze. This is a patch of fire on the ground that behaves similarly to Doomfire and spreads slowly around the room. It will eventually despawn. The most important part of Phase 1 is the positioning. Nefarian and Onyxia must be tanked parallel to each other on opposite sides of the room. This is to ensure they do not gain the Children of Deathwing buff and so that they do not Tail Lash or Shadow Flame Breath the opposite tanks. The raid will begin stacked on Onyxia's side in melee range, while an off-tank picks up the animated Bone Warriors and tanks them out of the raid a ways behind Onyxia. Assign healing as follows. 2 healers will keep Nefarian's tank alive. Use 1 healer for the animated Bone Warrior tank and a beacon if available. Use 1 healer for Onyxia's tank, and the rest, 2 or 3, will need to keep the raid alive, but should prioritize tanks first. When Onyxia's lightning orbs glow, she is preparing to use lightning discharge. This deals absurd damage and is very dangerous to the raid. Have the tank rotate her prior to this so that her tail is facing the raid instead of her side. Do not rotate her back until the lightning has faded. It is much better for the raid to be tail lash than to take the lightning damage. The Bone Warriors will be left alone in this phase. Simply heal the tank handling them and wait for them to despawn on their own. When Onyxia has reached around 10% health, DPS should switch to Nefarian. The ideal is to get him as low as possible before killing Onyxia becomes a necessity because of her lightning charge level. You want to kill her just before she explodes in order to spend more time damaging Nefarian. While DPSing in this phase, try to keep a frost trap or a similar slowing effect down for mind-controlled players. The slower they move, the more time they will have to stack stolen power. While mind-controlled, players can stack this buff to increase their damage to the boss. Remember to use the Free Your Mind ability before reaching the portal, or you will be killed very embarrassingly. Healers can feel free to break the effect immediately, as it will be more annoying than helpful. Remember that every 10% of Nefarian's health, his lightning machine will hit the raid for massive nature damage. The raid should use a cooldown of some kind to help live through this damage. Decide what these are going to be before the pull. When his health reaches 90%, we use a power word barrier to help the raid live through the electrocute. Heal up after this damage and continue DPSing. Your raid should always be able to push at least 1 electrocute in phase 1. If your DPS is high enough, you can opt to push 2 or perhaps even 3, but the fight can be completed with only 1 electrocute in phase 1. Additionally, it's a good idea to bring Nefarian just above electrocute level before killing Onyxia, so that when he lands in phase 3, the raid can push the next electrocute faster. Once Onyxia has been killed, phase 2 will begin. The raid will need to know their positions before this occurs, so there is no confusion as the room fills with lava. The most important part of phase 2 is how the raid is split up on the pillars. Make sure that each pillar has at least 2 healers. It is extremely beneficial for one of these to be a paladin. After this, make sure each pillar has at least 2 or 3 interrupters. Next, place 1 off-spec healer such as an elemental shaman, balance druid, or shadow priest on each platform. Finally, make sure that each platform has an even split of DPS. The first priority of this phase is to interrupt the chromatic prototypes so they cannot cast Blast Nova. This ability may wipe your raid as it deals heavy fire damage to everybody. It's best to set up an interrupt rotation on each platform and assign a backup in case somebody needs to jump off for explosive cinders. If afflicted with the explosive cinders debuff, do not immediately jump off of the platform. Wait until the debuff has around 5 seconds left, then jump away from the platform and continue swimming for about 5 to 8 yards. Healers will need to focus heals on the person in the lava to ensure their survival. After the explosion has occurred, swim back to the platform and jump back on. Interrupters should alert their pillar that they have the debuff, so a backup interrupt can occur. Healers should alert the platform if they must jump off as well, so a Tranquility, Hymn, or off-spec heals can be used to compensate. Once any ad has been killed, Phase 3 will begin. Because of this, it is important to control DPS so that all 3 ads can be killed at almost the same time. When Phase 3 begins, the lava will lower again and the raid must jump off of the platforms. Tank Nefarian in the middle of the room where he lands and have the raid stack in melee range on one side of him. The first electrocute may be very soon in this phase, so make sure a raid cooldown is assigned for it. We use Barrier for this electrocute here. Shortly into the phase, Nefarian will launch a Shadow Flame Spark at the animated Bone Warriors and cause all of them to resurrect. The off-tank will pick these mobs up and run them to the outer ring of the room to begin kiting. Assign the healing for this phase as follows. One healer will heal the Nefarian tank with a beacon if available. 1 or 2 healers will follow the kiting tank, and the remaining healers will heal the raid and help on tanks. The 2 most important pieces of Phase 3 are kiting the ads around the outer ring of the room and surviving each electrocute. Barrier, Divine Guardian, Power Word Shield, and Personal Damage Reduction or Survival cooldowns should all be used in rotation to survive each electrocute. This ability is the primary source of raid damage throughout Phase 3, so handling it should be a main priority. Kiting the ads revolves primarily around moving them enough so that they are not hit by the Shadow Flame Spark and keeping them out of Shadow Blaze fire. Doing this properly will cause them to periodically despawn, giving the healers on the kiting tank a break. While the off-tank kites, the main tank must watch where he is going and position Nefarian so that he does not Shadow Flame breathe or tail lash the kiter or the ads. This will mean rotating the boss occasionally and will force the raid stack to adjust somewhat. Place an easy to see raid marker on one player in the raid for the rest to stack on top of. Throughout all of Phase 3, just like in Phase 1, you'll want to keep a Frost Trap down or something similar down to slow mind control players. This allows them to acquire more stacks of stolen power and increases raid DPS significantly. Phase 3 will not be quick, but stay cool and keep up the stability and the boss will eventually die. Phase 2 is the main hurdle of this fight. When the raid can consistently get through the second phase, the consistency of Phase 3 will follow shortly. It's important to remember to stay calm during this fight. It can be quite lengthy and does not leave much room for error, but staying focused from start to finish will ease the strain of the fight tremendously. Thanks for checking us out here at L2R. I'm Kinaesthesia, and we'll see you at the next boss.
I wasn't feeling so good. I just didn't feel like playing anymore. So I went home, and I got all comfy and cozy and all scrunched up in front of my phonograph. And I sat there